think one of the really big things we don't learn at business schools that really should be on the curriculum is how to manage fear. I mean, we are steeped in fear building this.
Welcome to How Did You Get Into? The podcast where we dive into stories behind unexpected career paths and the journeys which shape who we are. Hi, I'm Clara and founder of Fired Up. Each week, we sit down with inspiring people from different backgrounds to ask how they got into what they're doing now. Today, I'm speaking with Ida Tin, a Danish entrepreneur and author who has significantly impacted women's health technology. Ida is the co-founder and former CEO of Clue, a pioneering menstrual health app. Beyond Clue, she's credited with coining the term FemTech, defining a sector dedicated to technology that supports and advances women's healthcare. Thank you very much for doing this. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
For this. Yeah, I mean, how do you describe to your kids what you do?
That's actually really funny because recently my son was asked by some adult, what does your mom do? And he was like looking at me, he was like, you describe that yourself. I was like, well, I'm definitely a little bit of a free agent floating around in the sort of larger global FemTech ecosystem, I'd say. Mm-hmm. But if I had to put one sort of word to it, I would say that I'm maybe just opinionated. And I mean, I love exploring sort of big systemic patterns and systems and try to be helpful to drive innovation in female health technology. And this peculiar thing has happened since I stopped being a CEO at Clue, which is that people reflect a new role back on me and they say, don't you want to come and talk here? Or can't you mentor there? Or can't you sort of be the experienced one? And I was like, oh, okay, that's what the world is sort of asking of me now. So I'm in some weird non-title way of service in that role, I think. Yes.
I was also curious to hear like what role does like inner work play for you in like your whole development in your career and life?
It's been really important because I could see that my own sort of growth, sort of ceiling of where I was as a human very much came to correlate where the company was. Mm-hmm. And I definitely felt like I could not afford to be a small version of myself. I would be holding everything back. Mm-hmm. So doing my inner work has been really crucial for my own well-being, but also for the well-being of the company and people around me. So I've been doing body work and sort of more sort of self-healing work with teachers and lots of sort of introspection and diarying, all these good things.
Mm-hmm. And what were like kind of like signals when you knew it's time to like go inward, and when do you know it's time to like go outward? Like now it's time to just like execute, get out there, and when do you know, okay, it's time for a retreat, pause a little bit, like what's perceived outside? Do you have like signs or anything that you're looking at?
I think when I was in my role as CEO, you are constantly asked to execute. But I would take a course that actually took me out of that context for about a week at a time over 3 years. So 4 times per year, I would actually go on a retreat type situation. Mm-hmm. But then after I stepped back, I decided just to say no to everything for some undecided period of time. And it turned out to be 2 years. So for 2 years, I really didn't engage. It was very much this introspective sort of period, I would say. Without it being super conscious, it was just sort of, I needed to sort of resolve my own life a little bit before being out in the world. And now I'm probably more in this sort of, hey world, what's going on? But it signals, I don't know. I mean, there are all the sort of stress symptoms that you might experience. And I've been very fortunate that I've never tried to burn out, and I've always somehow managed to sleep well at night. And things like this that I don't take for granted. I have 2 brothers who have burned out severely. I've seen it firsthand. I just have a lot of respect for trying to somewhat live in the pace of my body. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the really big insights after I started working as CEO. It was like how high a gear my body has been in for 10 years or more. Just this sort of, you're like on, it's very addictive as well. You're just like, full force. And really learning to relax has been a really interesting process. Mm-hmm.
That's why what I wanted to ask you also, like, what is something that you miss of like being in the business of Clue, and what is something that you're happy that you no longer right now don't have to do?
You know, I loved that from being hyper-focused on building a company and having kids, I have 2 kids, that was pretty much my world. There was not space for anything else. And then when I stopped working, it was like the world just kind of opened up. Suddenly there were all these other things in life that I love. Art and friendships. I did try to hold on to like core friendships, but being more of the friend I would love to be.
Mm-hmm. And something you miss from like this very executive
yes.
role?
I think what I started missing after these 2 years was one, sort of engaging with the world, but also this sense of building something. Mm-hmm. And now I've spent maybe a year and a half sort of speaking to so many interesting people all around the world. I've been really lucky that I got to travel a lot. It's so inspiring and I feel I learned, but now I'm starting to also feel like I would love to have it all built on top of each other and sort of build something again. Mm-hmm. I think that's the part that I'm missing.
So that it's not just like those moments for itself, like kind of like spread around, but coming together.
Yes, because what I realized now, looking back, is that I've kind of been doing research really for what I want to build now, which is a think tank. And then when you have sort of a container where all this new knowledge, all these new people you meet, and people who want to contribute can kind of come together, then it kind of becomes something. There has to be some sort of grain that things crystallize around. Otherwise, all my sort of learnings and things are just sort of, it's not manifested into something that other people can like benefit from in any way.
Maybe that takes me back to something that I found curious, like when I was like reading about you and also like seeing other interviews, is that there's like a very strong ethics coming through, like to the details of that clue. The user rights are like spelled out so that people actually understand it. So I saw these things, this pattern of like strong ethics, and in the same time, which doesn't need to be a contradiction, but for some it would be. You very strongly decided for like this business model that is for profit and not profit. I'm really curious to hear a little bit about that. That decision of like going for business while being an ethical person.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll start out by saying I think the planet is at a place where everybody has to start being ethical when they build businesses. I think it's becoming very clear that we cannot afford ourselves to only care about money because things are falling apart. So that aside, but yeah, when I had the idea for Clue, I did consider making it a nonprofit. I was really inspired by sort of open source things and beehive models. And then I realized that I really wanted to somehow get to scale. And I was thinking as a business model, as an engine, really. So it's simply a way to have, hopefully, a helpful product reach more people. I think I've also been humble as an entrepreneur. You cannot innovate in all areas of the business. There are definitely places where you're like, okay, I would love to change venture capital. Oh my God, I have many ideas on how we can radically change venture capital. So it would be much better for everybody involved. But it's like, okay, that was a big one to say when you're also trying to get something off the ground. Mm-hmm. Now I don't have to get the business off the ground. I'm actually pretty interested again in talking about how do we fix venture capital.
Okay.
But I want to start an NGO now. So now I'll try the other thing, see how that works.
Nice. I'm curious to see that and then kind of like see the comparison, especially like with the motor that you were speaking of, like that it really is an engine and it gives you energy, it gives you necessity kind of in a direction.
I mean, also to be fair, even if you're building an NGO and a not-for-profit, you probably still have to have a business model. I mean, you still probably have to generate revenue in some way. Mm-hmm. I think money and how money flows in some ways is an expression of relations, right? So you do something and other people find it meaningful, and really money is an exchange and sort of an outcome of that relationship. And if you have fair and healthy relationships, there's nothing wrong with value being exchanged. Like that's not the problem. The problem we have is when people put money making above like taking care of each other, the planet, fairness, justice, and these kind of other problems that it comes with it. But I don't think in itself there's nothing wrong with. I mean, money is smart, right? Otherwise, I wrote a book and you have to, I don't know, farm a chicken, and it's like I don't need a chicken. It's smart. I mean, money is a smart system. That's not the problem in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's still, I mean, why I'm asking this is because with a lot of founders that we're working with, when they are very ethical, sometimes what holds them back in stepping forward is like this fear. Yeah, I would say fear of money and like touching money and like earning money, and then all of like the guilt and shame and, you know, negative examples that you have out there. Also, like, you know, for me as like a female founder, it was like there's so many like male role models out there, and then when you look at like these scale ups, at these very known examples, you have bad examples of like how people deal with money. So
yeah, I mean, it's fundamentally, I think we have to redefine what success is. Because in my mind, we have a system where people have allowed themselves to put blinds on, and they're like, oh, now our company is worth $1 billion. We call it unicorn. We celebrate it. But then actually over here, our employees are burning out. Our forest is also burning out, or, you know, our village has just become flooded. Like there are all these systemic things where, again, I really feel the planet is at a point where we have to say, well, success can only be success if the system is healthy. We have to have a much more broad sense of what success is like, or what it is. And that mandate to care about other things have to come all the way from the top of the value chain, I think, and how, you know, the funds that gives money to the funds. For instance, like the money flow of venture capital is, you have the LPs, it can be a pension fund or a university or rich people. They give some money to funds who then invest in companies. And there has to be some agreement on all levels of that chain of like, when do we think we did well? And right now, there is a system that is too narrow. Like the definition is too narrow. It creates a lot of problems. I mean, at the very end, you end up with an unhealthy planet, but along the way, you also end up with suboptimal products that, for instance, doesn't care about user privacy. Yeah.
I mean, maybe I've asked this in another way, but I'm just so curious about like what helps you to like stay in alignment with your ethics, especially when there's like these moments of like growth and attention, right? Like you've I don't know, been published in big magazines and like talked to like very known people. So like, what helps you then like to come back to what feels true and right for you? When there's like also like in comparison to like, you know, other founders around you that might kind of strive for different things.
I mean, I didn't build Clue, right? There was a lot of amazing people who built Clue. I didn't invent FemTech. I gave something that was already happening a word. Like, I think it's really good to remember that you don't do anything alone. I mean, I think we've been lucky to get investors who cares about our vision. But I will also be honest and say, as the company matured, there were more pressure on becoming profitable, which also makes a lot of sense because that's like surviving in an environment where it's really hard. It was really hard to raise money after COVID, etc. So that's all good. I realized that I wasn't maybe as interested in learning what I would have to learn to keep being a good CEO, which was very kind of executional oriented and profit oriented, at least revenue oriented, and then also simply saying, you know what, somebody else can do this better than me, and passing it on to somebody else. It's kind of not a question in me. I think that's the best way of saying it. It's like, I never started Clue to make money. That was not my reason for doing this, and it still isn't. You know, and I do want to try and make a living with what I do, but if it's not the money that's driving, then something else is driving. It's a bigger why, and then you try to like live that why, and that makes these decisions easier, I think. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I want to like kind of like go on the other side, like this kind of like the success side, and then, you know, like, were there moments in your life maybe where you also experienced like being completely lost? Maybe like were you ever fired from a job? Like kind of like this, kind of like you wanted to go in a direction and it wasn't possible.
So I really only worked in organizations I created myself, but I did work in a real estate agent when I was 16 making photocopies, and they fired me after a week. And then when I graduated from business school, I got a job at KPMG to be an organization consultant in India. And they fired me before I left. So I have only ever been fired, actually. When I got fired from that job at KPMG, which I never started, I remember just thinking, So I was called in for a meeting and the boss says, you don't have corporate mindset. And in my mind, I was like, I think that's a compliment. I never, ever wanted to work in a place like that again. Have I been lost? I mean, yes. I think when you build a startup, you're constantly like driving full speed towards the wall, and you somehow hope that you will build a ramp that'll get you over. I mean, I think one of the really big things we don't learn at business schools that really should be on the curriculum is how to manage fear in yourself, in your team, your investors' fear, your users' fear. I mean, we are steeped in fear building this. Mm-hmm. And most founders, they are in perpetual alert in their bodies. Like it's a very like high energy state. And so I think it's not so much that I haven't been in situations where I felt like what are we going to do? It's more like a sense of like, okay, I recognize this is going on. Like somehow being able to like process things enough to be functional. Another thing, when I stepped back from Clue, I had no idea what I would do afterwards. And I had always wanted to be an artist. I really thought I would then finally somehow become an artist. You know, you go from having this title, it's easy for people to kind of put you in a box, understand what you are, and then suddenly you are nothing. You don't have any sort of identity, right? You don't have a title, you don't have an organization, you have no income. It's like this when you don't know where you're going. It's a really freaky place to hang out. And I have seen a lot of founders who absolutely cannot hang out in that space, and really fast they go to the next thing. And it's not entirely healthy, I think, because one, you need to somehow learn to calm your system down a little bit, but also you end up doing things that maybe doesn't actually resonate that much. And I'm really grateful that I had this sort of, I don't know whatever it took to sort of hang out there for 2 years, quite long, right? You like wonder, well, you know, I was surprised I would receive any emails from anybody after 2 years. You know, when I then opened my inbox after 2 years, I was like, wow, I was like, you know, people had somehow not lost interest hearing about FemTech, it turned out. I think what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, being lost is kind of comes with this, and being okay being lost is probably part of the solution.
Yeah, thank you for saying this. This is, I think, like one of our like very big messages that we have at Fired Up is that, unemployment is nothing to be ashamed of, even though we have like this cultural stigma. Yeah. You know, this you're only good if we can like label you, and if we understand what you're doing, and if you're not doing, then where's your value, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel that pressure of like you need to like produce something of value, or it sounds like you really allowed yourself this time of decompressing and not having a direction?
I mean, also to be totally honest, I decided to leave my partner, the dad of my 2 kids, and that was a pretty big, like even just on a practical level, like, you know, I had to buy a new flat, you know, it's like all these changes and kind of carrying your kids through this really difficult thing. And like, I was also just busy with my own mess. Like it took a little bit of time to like, and I'm probably still a little bit in that mess, to be completely honest. I still need a little bit of time to like sort my own house before I can fully create as much as I would love to. But I think I forgot your question.
No, I love that you're saying. I really love that you're taking this time, and this is, I think, an example that we don't see out there, because like, you know, how should like, or even like on LinkedIn, or how should you communicate that? Like everything, all of the boxes are only there to communicate like, here's your new job, here's your new achievement. But like crisis doesn't have like a platform that, you know, people want to use so much, even though it actually is so much more important actually for our development.
That's a good point. And when I was working, I at some point realized that the actual thinking work as a leader is totally undervalued. There's no space for it. So it's like every Wednesday, no meetings at all. So my Wednesdays were open. And that was a little bit scary, because people are like, is she actually doing anything? Is she working? Like, what's going on? But I think the free space is really undervalued. And that's one of the things I love about my life now, is that I'm not that busy. I mean, everything is relative, but you know, I really love that I have open time in my day. I think that's really undervalued. And of course, like in the kind of in a career path, yeah, it's like looks weird.
Yeah, the career gap. Explain your career gap.
Yeah, I was like, dude, I was living. Like, I don't know. I was like, yeah.
And maybe like that brings me to like a question of like you as like in a hiring position. Like, was there something that you looked at when you were hiring people, when you saw CVs, when you talked, when you had interviews? What were you looking for?
More and more, I would look for what I perceived as health, particularly mental health. Because, as I mentioned before, like people can be amazing in their craft, but the limit will not be their ability to learn that craft. It'll be some sort of inner something where they hit something, and if they're not willing to look at it, it kind of, and then it becomes this sort of in the whole organization where everything is like bouncing up against this thing. And so people who were willing to work with themselves, essentially, but also came in at a base level of like pretty healthy. And this is maybe a little bit controversial to say, but I met so many people that were so bruised out from their careers. And again, I've never worked anywhere. I'm like, what the hell is going on? What's going on? Because, I'd never built an organization or been in any, so I just did whatever I thought was really natural. And people would say, wow, that's a really different organization. And we feel like we can be ourselves. We feel we can show up as our full selves. We're a lot of gay people who are like, I used to have two lives, like my Thai life at work and then my like crazy gay life. And here I can just be myself. But it also meant that having that kind of work culture probably attract a lot of people that were kind of sensitive, beautiful beings. But, at some point I was like, whoa, we are a little bit overloaded with holding people. We also have more than statistically like probable of people getting pregnant at Clue, which is like, I got pregnant myself at Clue. Like, it's fair enough. But, at some point, the sense of like, what can we hold as a culture here? And if there is a little bit too much emotional stuff, it just gets heavy. So trying to hire for people that felt like pretty healthy. And then people who really deeply care about what we're doing. I think that's just an asset to have in an organization that has a mission. Yeah. You get that energy.
And that you feel in a conversation mostly, right? Not so much on the CV, but mostly when you speak to people, you get a sense of where their mental health or their interest also in personal development lies.
Yes, I barely read their CVs.
I was just sharing that in the interview I had, like that one of my coworkers is laughing that I have no clue what is in her CV. She's always laughing when I'm like, oh really, you work there?
Yeah. But I would also rely on teams that were deep in the matter to then do the sort of technical interview, because I'm not the right person to figure out if somebody's a good coder. And of course I would make sure that somebody would figure that out too. But I would ask people what gets them angry, for instance. That's a really great question, because people will answer that on so many different levels. Some people say, yeah, like unfairness unfairness gets me really worked up. And some people say, yeah, if people are late, like that pisses me off. Like people have so different, and it just says something about people. Some people say, yeah, I don't really ever get angry. I'm like, oh, okay. That's a warning sign. And then this is maybe a little bit out there, but one of the things I've been really interested and curious about exploring is what I think of as embodiment, because your body sends a lot of information up to your brain. Actually, more information goes from your body to your brain than the other way. And the body is a really advanced sensory system, right? We pick up a lot of things about other people. And sort of training my own skill of learning about people through my body has actually been kind of a little bit of a secret ninja trick, hiring people. Yeah.
I have a background in dance myself, and I don't have like a business background. So I always say that this is my superpower, like being a dancer. So like feeling my body and feeling other people's body.
No, I believe you.
Clue is also dedicated to, the body, to the cycle. So I would love to hear more about like your idea or perception of embodiment in hiring,
I think most people have the experience that you can walk into a room and you sense like a mood in the room, like what's going on here, or like, oh, this feels good. And I think it's a similar kind of mechanism where you kind of somehow train an awareness of like my own body in this room and how my own body is sort of affected of what's going on around me. And we don't have great language for it. I don't think we've not been trained in having a language for it. So it seems a little bit sort of woo-woo, but it's actually very concrete. It's like, for instance, when I was pitching to raise money, one of my sort of practices was, during this pitch meeting, can I feel my belly? Just even a couple of times. And you would be surprised how often you don't feel anything. But the thing is, feeling your body in the middle of this conversation makes you much more connected to the people that you're with. It makes you more present in the room. It also can help you sort of be like, okay, actually, like, relax your body, which sort of is a resource, right? You're not in this sort of tense mode where you're like, people don't understand what you're saying. You're like, phew. Maybe another way of thinking about it is a little bit like mindfulness, but for the body. Like, you not just like aware of how do you think about things or how do I react to something mentally, but also physically. And then as a leader, you can also use it in the way that you bring people together, a team. So, there's sort of the trust exercise and these sort of cliche things, but there's a reason why people do them. Like, if you've had that bodily experience with somebody, everything afterwards will maybe flow a little bit easier. And we would go on these offsites twice a year, and we would always have some body component. We would take walks or dance or do something that kind of had people have these sort of bodily experiences together. And it really is very powerful. So actually, after we had a dance teacher do a dance kind of workshop with us. And afterwards, the team literally spontaneously started singing. It has never happened before or after, but suddenly something new was possible and available in those relations where it was like this kind of deeper relational possibility in a way. It was really significant. Like, it was so clear to see. But we would also have, for instance, rooms or spaces where you would take off your shoes. And this maybe seems a little bit like silly, and it kind of was a little bit silly. But it created a different sense of like, oh, we're sitting here in a somewhat intimate space, and we have a little bit of humor about like who is wearing what socks today. And people who came from the outside, from maybe very corporate environments, they would be like, oh, this is like a little like we're crossing some boundaries here, or like it's like expand. It's like it just created like this relational feel that is conductive for a good conversation. Or I would have a boardroom with no table, because I was like, I don't ever want to be like the investors over there and we're on the other side of the table. It's like, no, we're kind of sitting in a circle here.
Yeah.
We would have Body Tuesdays, because I realized I was doing not enough sports. So then I had a personal trainer at some point. I was like, this is silly. Like, more people could be here with me doing this out in the park. So then we invited the whole team to do sports for an hour and a half during work time. And we had a 4-day work week, like at some point. That changed after I left. But all these things are all ways of creating health. And all of this gives a resilience in the organization, which is a huge business asset. So, for instance, we went through FDA clearance, a process that took 2 years. It was grueling. It was horrible. Thousands and thousands of pages of technical documentation. Really boring work. Nobody had signed up for this. Nobody was hired knowing that they were going to do this. And people did it. They went the extra mile, the extra 1,000 miles to do this work. And I really think that all that sort of health and coherence and sharing a sense of belonging, like all of this made that possible, which was a really very concrete kind of business achievement.
Yeah, then you see it kind of like what's the value in like this investment in the end, right?
Yeah.
Is when like a crisis or something that you didn't expect to comes
exactly.
in, and how people can handle that, right?
Yeah.
And does this kind of like comfort zone translate then also into like taking action?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. When did you know that it was time for you to leave Clue?
So it was a combination of different things. The COO had just left. So it was this moment where either I would hire a new COO, which is this really kind of close relationship, and you wouldn't hire somebody if you were like about to leave. So it was like this sense of like, am I going to stay for a while or not? And I think the board was also like, either this could also be a moment where we could get a new CEO, because the company was sort of going from being like a startup to more of a real business, and they're like, maybe we should get a real CEO. But it made sense, and it resonated somewhere deep in me, where I'm like, one, I was a little bit tired. I'd been doing this for a decade. And two, I could see that the things I would have to learn were things where I was like, they don't excite me so much. Mm-hmm. I know there would be a lot of Excel sheets in my life, and I just don't like Excel sheets. And then there was also, because of like timing with the financing around different things, like I had this opportunity that I could get to hire 2 people from the team. So 2 people I really trusted and knew, and have them be co-CEOs. So it's like everything kind of just like lined up. Mm-hmm. And it was a bit of a tough process in some ways, but I was a bit provoked of how it all kind of happened, but deep in my heart, I knew, it is the right time. Mm-hmm. I had noticed that I was not always the one setting the bar the highest in meetings. Mm-hmm. And that's not good. Mm-hmm. I was like, I was like, that's no good. Because I think as a founder, what you really bring is that you bring your life energy, you bring your vision, you're sort of, what if we, and then you kind of pull everybody like with you somewhere a little bit. But if you're not really pulling that much, it's like, nah, like that's not cool. So I knew, and somebody else also knew, and was like pinging tapping my shoulder.
And you were courageous to leave even without knowing what's next, which is a scary thing to do for many people.
Yeah. Yes, it was scary. I mean, I was also in a financial situation where I could do it, which many people don't have that luck. Mm-hmm. But I was okay not knowing what I would be next. Mm-hmm. There are actually very few moments in life where you really truly have this like totally open space. When I got fired from KPMG, I had my good night, like my farewell party. I had packed all my things and put in storage. I was literally sitting like in an empty flat. The taxi was ordered for like next morning, going to India where this job was taking place. And I got a phone call like, you're not going. So I just had this like, what is going to happen in my life now? But those are rare moments. Mm-hmm. And suddenly I had again this sort of, like it's wide open.
So appreciating empty space instead of like being scared of the empty space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good quality to have. And I have one more question, which is like, what can other industries, or what can tech, like you're like, you coined like FemTech, but what can tech or beyond learn from FemTech?
So the technology sector has a lot of problems. There is a lot of wealth kind of aggregation. So we have wealth distribution problems globally. There is a democratic vacuum, like who gets to decide what's being innovated. So there's all these weird things going on. But in FemTech, if you look at it as through the magnifying glass and see this as like a microcosmos, there's a lot of things going right there on how to build technology in my mind. It's very user-centric. So people really build to solve real problems that people have in the world that are very urgent and deep and big and important problems. I mean, everybody's solving a problem on some level, but it's like, if it takes 7 years to diagnose a woman with endometriosis and she's lying in like fetal position because it's so painful, like we need to do something. So that's one thing. People also tend to build quite diverse teams. Women are building, and it's no secret, right? There's no, like, the world is being rebuilt right now in data and with technology, and the men are creating the world again. And it's a problem for the planet, for the men, for the women, for all of us. Mm-hmm. So that's great. And there's also often, I find, like a level of like passion and care for these products. And it gives business models that seems very sort of straightforward. It's like, it's kind of, there's a high level of transparency. It's not like weird, like business models and something dodgy happening over there far away. Like it's sort of, it's a real thing. Do you want it? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, give me some money. We'll trade. And it's also bringing more of the life experiences that women have into our cultural space, because a lot of the things that women experience, because we have the biology we have, is completely invisible in our culture. It's living out in the darkness where nobody sees it, talks about it, barely the women ourselves. And suddenly with this innovation, it brings in these areas of life that were so unknown before. It's like, it's a thing that the tools we've been using to doing, vaginal exams is really nasty. Yeah, maybe we should invent something new. Actually, we have, here it is. It's like, and there is so many things in women's health that just urgently needs to be either innovated or re-innovated.
And with all the areas that you have disrupted and want to disrupt, and like being critical and like, I would say sharp, that's at least how I perceive you. You still, I still experience you as very open and soft. That's something that really stands out for me with you. Do you know what I mean? Like with like kind of like being disruptive, that could also like make you like very, I don't know, like hard and like frustrated and disappointed by the world. Like somehow you seem very optimistic with what's happening right now.
I think it's an amazing wave of kind of good energy and innovation that is happening in the FemTech space. People really are building what they need. I mean, like everybody, I'm hugely concerned with many things that are happening on the planet. But in my mind, there's a really, and it's actually not just in my mind, there's actually a lot of data showing this, that if you invest into women's health, you drive economies and you get healthier populations, countries, planet. It's like invest into women's health and you will end up with a healthier planet. It's actually like that. And that gives me hope, because I can see that there is more innovation and more money coming to women's health. There is more awareness also in the public sector around this. Challenging your anger to something constructive is really important. And women's anger is hugely underleveraged. And I think the way forward is to try and be really inclusive. That's why I'm doing this series on LinkedIn on like telling men about what it feels like to have a woman's body, because how would they care? How would they invest? How would they regulate smartly? How would they do anything wisely in this field if they have no idea what it actually feels like to have this biology? And my experience has been that many men actually do want to know, but they have no idea because women don't tell them. And many women barely actually know themselves, because again, we are seeped in this cultural sort of weirdness around many of these things, and lack of data and lack of actual scientific research and all of that too. Yeah.
Maybe like some last advice that you could give to some female entrepreneur, somebody who wants to get into FemTech. What would you like kind of like give them on their way?
I would say trust that what they see as market opportunities or something that they know is needed is real. Because you will be sitting across the table with somebody who haven't had these life experiences that will like question it. They'll be like, is this really a thing? Is this really important? And this is not like fictional. Like I had a call yesterday with a woman. She has like an impressive career doing genetic stuff. She works at a company now where they do really advanced sort of deep tech diagnostics. I can't get into details, but the point is she's sitting across a bunch of guys and they're like, why is this better than what was before? And she just want to like rip out her hair. It's like, dude, you really don't get it. Like they literally don't get it. It's like, yes, this would make a huge difference. Yeah. And so founders will be met with this sort of, is what you're seeing actually real? And you just have to be like, yes, it is real. Even if you don't get it. And I would say like the female founders don't need the advice. It's the ones listening to them that needs the advice. And it's a humbling thing that people have to learn. They have to learn to know that there are things they don't know. And they have to learn to listen very carefully. And they have to be able to listen also when the people delivering the message doesn't look like they're going to be a successful leader. They don't look like they are ambitious. They don't look like they're really smart.
And they're stereotypes or what they know.
But they are all of these things. And so the training to a large extent, I think, have to happen to the ones meeting the female founders.
I like that angle shift. Instead of kind of correcting.
And the caveat, you have to be really pragmatic because you can only do your own stuff. So it is a game and you are in it, and it is a system, you are in it. So you also have to be smart on how you navigate it and survive in it. Might be having a male co-founder, for instance.
Yeah, I've heard that one, yeah.
Yeah, and also I think it's great. Actually, I think all companies should have both a man and a woman building it together with many more men and women. Sometimes people say build by women for women, but I think we should build by diverse teams for the world.
Thank you very much for sharing all of this with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And that's it for today's episode of How Did You Get Into? If you're also thinking about changing your career or starting your own business, we at Fired Up would love to support you with free coaching. Just book an intro call to learn more. Hearing stories like the one we heard today is exactly why we do what we do. Change is always an opportunity. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories every week. And if there's somebody you would love to hear from or a career you're curious about, drop us a message. We love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in, and we see you next time.